Today, I'll be talking about one of the biggest regrets people have during retirement, which is their spending strategy. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Julia Lemke, certified financial planner and managing director of URS Advisory. And I've worked with numerous clients who initially approach retirement spending all wrong, either being too restrictive and missing out on enjoyable experiences, or by spending too freely in those first crucial years without understanding the long-term impact. And that's exactly why I'm making this video today, to take you through a real-life example of someone who regretted their spending habits and how to avoid the same mistakes. So let's get into it. Before diving into the details, let's look at a common retiree spending pattern. So imagine someone who's done everything right. They've maximized their retirement accounts, saved diligently, they've waited until 65 to retire, they've built a solid nest egg, but after leaving the workforce, years of delayed gratification catch up with them. They spend heavily in the first 2 years. Luxury travel, generous gifts to family, long-awaited home upgrades, and other big-ticket splurges. By year 3, the excitement wears off, and so does the financial comfort. Anxiety about running out of money sets in, and they slam the brakes on spending, shifting to a lifestyle that's far more restricted than necessary. This brings us to one of the most overlooked challenges in retirement, which is the psychological pendulum swing. After decades of saving, retirees often fall into one of two traps. Some overspend early to make up for lost time, while others underspend out of fear, even when they have the means to enjoy life, and both patterns can derail a retirement plan. One leads to financial stress later, and the other leads to missed opportunities and unnecessary sacrifice. The key to a fulfilling retirement is finding a balance that aligns spending with long-term sustainability and personal values. If you find yourself worried about making the same spending mistakes in retirement, click the first link in the description to watch a short video I put together. It goes over the exact system I use to help retirees create a sustainable spending plan. The consequences of these spending mistakes, particularly the overspending, go well beyond the numbers. They actually shape the entire retirement experience. If you overspend the first few years of retirement, you will face the harsh reality of having to make dramatic lifestyle cuts instead of settling into your golden years gracefully. What's supposed to be a time of ease becomes overshadowed by financial stress and difficult trade-offs. And on the flip side, those who underspend out of fear often look back with regret, realizing that they skipped out on experiences like travel, hobbies, quality time with loved ones during their healthiest, most active years. Both groups often end up with some form of regret. And it's all due to not having a structured, sound plan at the outset of retirement. When we first meet new clients, one of their biggest questions is, how much can we comfortably spend? And the answer depends on a long list of variables, and it's the single most important number of a person's retirement. Yes, even more than their net worth. One of my favorite phrases is, you cannot out-invest overspending, because it's a powerful reminder that no matter how well your investments perform, they cannot reliably compensate for consistently spending beyond your means, especially when there are no more paychecks rolling in. I've seen clients squander hundreds of thousands of dollars and also squander millions of dollars. So it doesn't matter how much you have, it matters how much you keep. Let's now talk about a better approach to retirement spending, and it starts with asking yourself the following questions. You may want to pause this video as I'm talking to write these down so that you have some time to answer and reflect on them. So first, what are your biggest spending priorities? A follow-up question would be, which specific activities do you think will bring you the most fulfillment in retirement? List these out by priority, name, and projected cost. 2, have you separated your essential spending, so your home, your insurance, your health, your groceries, taxes, maintenance, from your discretionary expenses, things like hobbies, gifting, charity, travel, etc. 3, how might your spending needs change over the course of your retirement? If you've watched my videos, you know that we model the retirement spending smile, which is the concept that in the early years of retirement, we tend to spend much more than we do as we age, so the costs start to gradually go down over time. The other side of the smile is where costs can rise again due to needing long-term care. So understanding this curve can help you build a plan that adjusts with your age. 4th, what legacy goals or gifting goals, if any, are important to you? 5th, what is your withdrawal strategy from different accounts by tax type? Will you be pulling from your brokerage account or your pre-tax accounts first? And follow-up question, why? How does that strategy benefit you? And lastly, have you built flexibility into your spending plan for market downturns and even for bull markets? These answers need to be clear and specific. Now let's go over a few tips that will allow you to enjoy the freedom you've earned without jeopardizing your long-term security. So first, let's start with those first 2 years of retirement. And this is where many people fall into what I call the celebration trap. After decades of working and saving, it feels like it's finally time to let loose. And in many ways it is, but not without structure, right? It's easy to overspend early and then regret it later. So instead of diving into multiple big ticket expenses all at once, say renovating the kitchen, buying a new car, or taking that, $20,000 bucket list cruise, start by setting a spending ceiling for discretionary items in your first 12 to 24 months. So think of it like easing into a marathon. One of my very first financial planning clients came to me by referral in their early 70s. Let's call them Mark and Susan. They retired at 65 just like they had always planned, and they were diligent savers. They had built up a nest egg of $1.4 million between their 401ks and IRAs, and they had no debt. So on paper, they were doing really well, right? They were in great shape. But after decades of discipline, they were finally ready to enjoy life, and did they ever? In the first 18 months of their retirement, they went all in on what felt like a well-deserved celebration. First, they took a month-long cruise through the Mediterranean. Then they helped their daughter with a down payment on her first home. They upgraded their kitchen, complete with marble countertops and high-end appliances. And they bought a brand new SUV. And none of these decisions were wrong necessarily, but they added up quickly. And by the time they reviewed their portfolio at the end of year 2, they had spent over $180,000. So this is more than double what they anticipated spending. And that's when the anxiety started to kick in. Mark started checking their accounts daily. Susan began second-guessing even small purchases. They started pulling back altogether, so not just on the big trips, but even dinners out and small indulgences. The fear of running out of money had crept in and was now shaping their entire lifestyle. They told me, "We just wish we'd paced ourselves." So we got to work building a spending plan that gave them room to enjoy themselves without going overboard. So it struck the right balance, which helped them feel comfortable spending again. So sometimes it's less about the numbers and more about having clarity and structure to give yourself permission. Second, shift your focus from possessions to experiences. Studies and just life in general tell us that shared moments create way more happiness than material things. So rather than buying a luxury car you'll drive alone, consider planning a trip with your kids or grandkids. Go on that photography retreat you've always dreamed about, or take a cooking class in Italy with your spouse. These are the things you'll remember, and they usually come at a lower long-term cost than those high-maintenance purchases. Third, plan for flexibility because the market will not always cooperate. Your spending plan will need to adjust depending on how your portfolio is performing. If markets are strong, you might spend a little more, and if markets pull back, you're going to need to pause or scale down discretionary spending. So let's say that you've budgeted $15,000 a year for travel. In a good market, maybe you take that river cruise through Europe. Whereas in a tough market, you might opt for a few smaller domestic trips or delay a larger purchase. The point is to keep your core plan intact by staying nimble on the extras. So this is why we use the guardrail theory in our financial plans. The guardrail theory is a technique sort of like driving down a winding road, with guardrails on both sides to keep you from veering too far off course. In retirement planning, those guardrails are spending limits that help keep your plan intact even when the market goes up or down. For example, the Millers currently have a little over $1.4 million in their nest egg to pull from in retirement, as well as Social Security benefits. All in, if they live to age 95 with their current investments, which are 60% equities, 40% fixed, their max net monthly spend is $9,071 per month. But if the market does well over the next several years and their portfolio grows to over $1.6 million, they can increase their spending to a net $10,192 per month. However, if the market crashes and their portfolio dips to under $1 million, they'll need to reduce spending to $8,700 per month. These settings can be adjusted, and this test should be run at every financial review as your portfolio balance changes daily. Lastly, think in terms of retirement phases because your needs won't stay static. I talk about the no-go, slow-go, and go-go years in almost every video. But if you haven't heard of it, I'll explain it quickly. The early years, often called the go-go years, are typically the most active. So this is a time to travel, explore hobbies, check off your bucket list. But in your mid to late 70s, you might find yourself slowing down. Less travel, fewer activities, and more time at home. Your spending naturally declines, and in our practice, we call this advanced age, where spending typically declines by about 25 to 30% from that pre-retirement spend. Then, in your mid-80s and beyond, we often see costs tick up, and this is driven by healthcare needs, things like assisted living and home care, or out-of-pocket medical costs. Building a plan that reflects these evolving needs, what we call the retirement spending smile that I referenced earlier, ensures that you're not just financially secure now, but also later, when care becomes a bigger part of the picture. In our practice, we always stress test for long-term care events to make sure that our clients are well aware of how this would affect their financial plan, their surviving spouse, and their family, so that they can make educated decisions moving forward. Now that you know why many retirees get their spending completely wrong in these first critical retirement years, you can approach your own retirement spending with greater awareness and balance. Remember, retirement spending isn't about restriction or splurging. It's about intentional allocation that provides both security and fulfillment. So don't let emotional spending decisions in those first 2 years compromise your long-term retirement experience. And if you're still uncertain on how to structure your retirement spending plan, click the link in the description below to watch the short video I created that will take you through the exact system I use with my clients to help them truly enjoy their retirement.